they express themselves. We are fortunate and grateful to have two colleagues from the School of Social Welfare who here with us. One is Dr. Anna Hayward, who's an associate professor in the School of Social Welfare. Dr. Hayward's research focuses on evaluating programs serving children and families, father involvement, and children and families affected by incarceration. Not necessarily fathers, but often, I guess. She's currently a PI on a federally funded grant evaluating services with the Suffolk County Fatherhood Initiative. She is presenting this work and conducting this work with Dr. Amy Hammock, who is an assistant professor in the School of Social Welfare and a core faculty member in the program in public health. Her research focuses on prevention and intervention to address intimate partner violence in various contexts, including fatherhood programs, immigrant communities, and college campuses. She's co-PI on the evaluation of the Suffolk County Fatherhood Initiative. And to those of you who come to this for the first time, the problem of domestic violence is super important in the context, for instance, of Army veterans. The Army has a huge problem with it. I say that because it was recently in the paper, right? They really don't know what to do. It's a real crisis. And so I think even though this is not related to the Army, it clearly gives us and will give us a really good insight and conceptual tools and empirical evidence for where this problematic comes from and what can be done. Thank you very much for coming.
I just wanted to acknowledge one more person that's in the room, which is Jackie Killip. He is our research analyst on the evaluation project, and he was a student intern with us in social welfare last year and has since stayed on the project. And he has been working on a lot of the qualitative analysis for the study we're going to talk about today. So my name is Anna Hayward. I've been working with the Suffolk County Fatherhood Initiative over the past 6 or 7 years. I actually brought some brochures, well actually Jack brought them, so let me give him credit because I did not remember to bring them. If you want to just look at the program services, I can just pass these around if you want to take one. And we have some pens, so I'll just leave them here and you can take one after the presentation if you're interested. So I do have to acknowledge the funding for this project. This is a federally funded grant from the Department of Health and Human Services that funds both the program, the Suffolk County Fatherhood Initiative, and the evaluation that the three of us are working on. And my views and what we share here are not the views of the federal funding agency, but only ours. So we know that fathers are really important in children's development. There's been a lot of research, especially over the past 10 or 20 years, looking at what exactly the role of dads are. And we know that dads an involved father can have positive outcomes for kids in childhood and adolescence, decrease criminal involvement, decrease in mental health issues, and usually better economic outcomes for families where there is a father that's involved in some way, not necessarily living in the home. So we know that dads impact children across three kind of broad domains. First of all, there's just the relationship that fathers have with their child. The second way is the support, especially social support given to the child's mother. And the third way is just like by virtue of having another income in the household, economic support, material support. So for that reason, the federal government also has been interested in funding more of these programs for fathers, and that's what this program is doing. So fatherhood programs usually emphasize parenting skills. So teaching dads how to interact with their children, what are developmentally appropriate things for kids to be doing, providing material and emotional support. So there's usually like a child support component of fatherhood programs, as well as help with getting jobs, developing resumes, helping to build the economic capital of the household, and building this collaborative, will this do the slides too? Building this collaborative relationship with the mom around parenting issues. So the messages within fatherhood programs are related in this way. That fathers are more than just an economic support. So in the past, the emphasis has been on child support enforcement and what can a father do economically. And sometimes for dads, that's a really negative message, because if a father is unemployed or unable to support the child economically, sometimes there's a tendency to say, well, I don't want to see my kid until I can provide them these material things. So one of the fundamental messages of these fatherhood programs is that you can be a good dad, even if you can't right now, for whatever reason, provide that economic support. Another message is the importance of role modeling of dads, especially for male children. The need to communicate effectively and have a positive relationship with the significant other or the mother of the child. Oftentimes the fathers that we work with in this program, it's not just your traditional mother, father, child, and then maybe the parents are separated, but the father may have multiple children with multiple different significant others or exes, and negotiating those relationships to benefit the child. And the final message, that good fathers are strong, involved, and caring. And I think, especially for this program, capable. A lot of our dads are, I'll talk about the demographics of the population, but a lot of our dads are struggling with substance abuse, homelessness, economic instability, mental health issues, and a lot of the focus on the program is just building that capacity and that self-advocacy that they can be strong and good dads. Okay, so in those ways, these responsible fatherhood programs have been described by some as promoting this idea of hybrid masculinity. So this is a new, more flexible type of masculinity, and it's more expansive than, like I said, just the breadwinning role, just the kind of bring home the bacon, so to speak. However, it has been critiqued in some ways that it's reinforcing these masculine ideals of being strong and having to be the role model in the family. So there's kind of a little bit of confusion on like what role of masculinity we're promoting in these programs, because it's a little bit of both, and that kind of brings us to what we're exploring in this study today. So just a little bit about the program. You have the brochure. What's interesting about this program is that it was developed out of Retreat, which is a domestic violence provider here in Suffolk County. So that's why we have this emphasis on preventing interpersonal violence and family violence in the home. So as I mentioned earlier, it's been funded by the Department of Health and Human Services from 2011 to 2015. The program served over 800 fathers in Suffolk County alone. And since 2015, we've served over 800, and the program has expanded into Nassau County. It's been a collaboration with Stony Brook School of Social Welfare and the Retreat from the beginning, from the inception, which means that myself as a researcher and our School of Social Welfare was involved in developing the intervention as well as the evaluation. So it's a primary prevention approach, and it's serving low-income men who are at risk for family violence. So participants receive case management. They receive an evidence-based fatherhood group, which is focusing on the parenting piece that I talked about, focusing on the dad's relationship with their child. They receive a healthy relationship group, so that's really focusing on their relationship with the mother of their child and their significant other, who may not be the same person, and on economic stability. So a big piece of why dads come to our program is for the economic stability. They hear that they can get transportation. We have suits for them to wear to job interviews. They can get assistance with their resume, job development, job placement, what else? The whole kind of gamut. The program does have the...
They got a lot of reasons. They can, if they need things like diapers or,
Right.
or clothes for their kids sometimes.
So yeah, so that's
the
also
case management.
Right, so through the case management, they also get access to concrete, their concrete needs, food, diapers, things for their kids at Christmas time, Christmas presents, etc. As well as referrals for housing, substance abuse, anything that they might need. So this is just the demographics of the program. So if you know about Suffolk County, you know this county is about 80% white, and we are serving a much more diverse population. So our population is about 20% Hispanic, and then about half and half Black or African American or white, with usually over the years it goes between 1% and 5% a Native American population, depending on the activities in the tribal settings. So just to point out, 77% of the dads in the program are unemployed, and of those, almost 60% are actively looking for work. So this is a population of men who are not working but want to be working and are trying to provide better for their families. Almost 30% have no high school degree, and not very many have higher education. So it's also a challenging population to find employment or high-wage employment. So some of the previous research that we've done with this program, we looked at, we noted that there were high rates of substance abuse and mental health in the population, and we looked at what are some of the barriers for men seeking mental health care. We looked at risk and protective factors for family violence and the importance of social support. We looked at predictors of father involvement, and found that there is some relationship between their involvement and their relationship status, but not necessarily marriage. A lot of these programs promote marriage between couples as helping with father involvement, but the marriage wasn't necessarily the most important piece. It was more so if they were in a committed relationship. And we find across the board that fathers in the program are highly satisfied with services, and they report learning a lot about their role as a father. So when we ask them what they've learned, they give us very positive feedback. So, okay. I'm turning it over?
You're turning it over.
So as part of our, so we collect a lot of quantitative data. We collect a lot of surveys and information about the dads and about their participation in the program. But the reason we have Dr. Hammock on board in the project is to look from a qualitative perspective and get more in-depth as to the men's relationships with their partners, their relationships with these ideas of masculinity, what it means to be a father. So I will turn it over to Dr. Hammock.
Thank you so much. Is it good if I stand here so you can see the screen? Okay. So one of the things we found out when we were analyzing kind of the qualitative data on why, people were highly satisfied, but we didn't really know why. So we found these 5 interlocking themes. So one was the warm, non-judgmental atmosphere. The fathers really felt like they could walk into this place and not feel that they were being judged, like Dr. Hayward was saying. They also felt like they'd learned a lot of really concrete skills, and many of them talked about not having learned those skills in their families of origin, and really feeling like, oh, we were taught these concrete skills that now I can go home and practice with my child. They talked about connecting with other dads. This was not totally across the board, but definitely some of the dads didn't really have many friends that they felt like they could count on to talk to about parenting. I think in general, as in terms of talking about masculinity, I don't think it's something that is often valued in this culture, is men talking about parenthood, right? So here they actually were expected to talk about parenthood in the groups, but then continued that relationship often over texting or maybe the phone if they were having trouble with a particular situation. There was also this provision of instrumental support. So by that I mean the diapers, the clothes, a lot of people talked about like strollers, just actual concrete things that they needed to improve their ability to be an effective father. And then one of the things that we found really interesting was this cultivating patience regarding mother of the child. So this was mentioned as a really key theme that in some ways locked a lot of these things together. And so we're really interested in knowing more about that. My background is as an intimate partner violence researcher. So I'm interested in the, not just when violence happens, but what's happening around the edges of when violence potentially could happen, right? And how are norms of masculinity and femininity kind of involved in that? So that's what this study is about, right? So the current study is to explore how men in this fatherhood program learn to communicate with mothers of their children, as they were talking about in this kind of like more patient way, right? So one of the questions was, how do the men in the fatherhood program describe communication with the mothers of their children, and potentially, what attitudes, beliefs, and skills do they draw on in this communication? So what we did is that we took, Dr. Hayward was talking about the larger study sample. For this current study, where were you pointing? Where this
side one. The side, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. So as Dr. Hayward talked about, this was, the whole project was really done in collaboration with a community-based agency that works on domestic violence, right? And so from the initial beginnings of the grant proposal and then working out the program, we had this advisory board. So with this study, we talked with dads in the advisory board about what kinds of questions we would ask in an interview, I think we asked whether they would be comfortable speaking to women about those questions, or whether they would prefer to have a man asking those questions, to which they said, we don't care, we just want to talk about this. And they were really helpful in kind of designing the overall kind of questions that we were going to ask. So we audio recorded in-depth interviews with 40 of the fathers. They were each about an hour long, and we conducted them over a little bit under a year. Okay. So this is what we talked about when we had several domains in our interviews, right? So we asked them about how they entered into the program, because as Dr. Hayward talked about, they were recruited, I don't know if you talked about recruitment, but they were recruited from a bunch of different places, from jails, from homeless shelters, from other programs, substance abuse programs. So how were they recruited into the program, and then also like what drew them to this particular program? Their employment and incarceration history, relationships with the mothers of their children, which is what we're going to talk about today, and the knowledge and skills that they learned. And then they were transcribed, these interviews, and then we checked them for accuracy. So in terms of, I'm just going to flip through these. In terms of some of the demographics, the one thing, this subsample mirrors the subsample that Anna was talking about, except that you'll notice that there were more Black or African American men in this sample than in the larger study. And you'll notice here the number of children really varied. So 35% had one child, 13% had 7 to 8 children. And as Dr. Hayward mentioned, that could be with many different partners or the same partner. There's a really good kind of distribution of age in this sample, which I think also provides some interesting perspectives on masculinity and also on parenthood. So we conducted data analysis in Deduce, and the way we conducted data analysis is that I initially went through the transcripts and did initial coding. And then I came up with an initial list of codes, and then the three of us coded a subsample of the transcripts and came to an agreement on kind of our focused coding list. And then we coded the rest of each of us coded a subsample of the rest of the transcripts. We grouped codes into themes. And then we did memoing and concept mapping to kind of come up with the themes that were really kind of inductive into in the work. If you want to talk a little bit more about this, Jack and I can talk a little bit about our lengthy process in the data analysis. Okay, so our findings. In terms of how men communicate, describe communication, they talked about learning, they talked about detached de-escalation, and we'll go into that a little bit more. They also talked about engaged perspective taking. So I'm going to give some examples of this in a second. And then when they talked about what attitudes, beliefs, and skills they draw on for this communication, they mentioned several things. So the skill of controlling one's emotion and behaviors. So when we think about hegemonic masculinity, I think there's kind of like a really interesting intersection here. And the importance of role modeling for children, so very similar to some of the things that were expected or hoped for when the program was designed. And belief in the importance of their role as a father. And then for many of them, although not all, there was this concept of recognition of the actual work that motherhood entails. The kind of the work that is constant and everyday. So we're going to go through examples of each of these. So detached de-escalation, many people talked about, and basically instead of getting all riled up in communications with their mothers of their children about the child or about who gets to take the child or whatever, they decided, they learned that they could detach. Some of them talked about being a brick wall, right? And that was actually better than getting angry or violent. So I'm going to read some of these quotes, because maybe some of you won't be able to read them in the back. So this says, my daughter's mother, she's like very, like, oh, he's still the same way. Like, you haven't seen me in so many years. You don't know how I am. Just because I don't want to communicate with you, does that mean I'm the same way? Like, no, I'm not. I just don't want to communicate with you. Because she does have that power, kind of. Just to make me effing crazy. Like, do the things that I wouldn't do normally. So I know that. So I'm not going to give her that power. So I choose not to talk to her. I don't have to. Okay? That was turning off the monitor. We just don't get along, so why even try fighting? I'm just like, just stop. Put the kid on the phone, please. Put the kid on the phone and just don't talk to me, please. That's it. So we can see this as kind of a utilitarian way to engage in communication with the mother of their children, right? There's not a lot of relationship building there, but at least it's not it's not escalating, right? Others talked about engaged perspective taking, which was basically realizing that they could take the perspective of the mother and step out of their own perspective when they were getting angry and maybe try to see it from their point of view. So an example of this, no, okay. I'm just going to do the whole quote, and then we'll figure it out. Okay. So Marquise said, I've learned to listen a whole lot more. And the interviewer says, that's important. Can you think of a situation with your partner that you've dealt with differently now that you've attended sci-fi than you would have before? I guess. I consider their point of view than I would have, more their point of view than I would have before. Like before I was more close to, it's my way's the right way. Stubborn. Not so open to everyone else's views. So William says, not too long ago when it was time for my daughter to go back to school, her mother was stressed about finances. I could tell the tone in her text was negative, and so I had to come back with something positive. And I remember in the class that we had to look at things not just from our own point of view, but also from the mother's point of view, and basically analyze what she's saying. And I knew that she needed help with thinking things through. And if we put our heads together, we could figure it out. So I just had a lot of patience, and I stayed positive. So here we see a difference when escalation kind of increases, at least in this person's perspective, right, from the other side, instead of kind of becoming a brick wall and not answering, saying, actually, like, maybe I could help out in this situation and realize why these texts might be escalating. Maybe it's because she's stressed about finances. I know what it's like to be stressed about finances. Maybe I can help her, right? In addition, kind of talking about the skills they've learned, a lot of them talked about controlling one's own emotions and behaviors. So an example of this is Justin said, Like that fact that it's all right to be mad. It's just not all right to act on it in certain ways. And there's ways you can act on it without affecting someone else. It's not all about giving an action to get a reaction. Like I used to have that. I used to thrive off of going tit for tat with my ex. And now I don't even. I don't want to say demean her, but I don't give her the opportunity to rise me up. Yeah, you don't feed into it? Yeah, like if it's going south, I'll just maybe be like, maybe we should just come back to this discussion at another time because I feel myself getting angry. It helps. I've definitely learned it's not worth getting out of control. And they also talked about role modeling for the children, right? Seeing themselves and their interactions with the mother as role modeling for the kids. So, like I said, unfortunately, I'm not with his mother. I would have liked for it to work, you know. But I wasn't happy, and I didn't want to be in an unhappy relationship just for the sake of my son. I have my own life, too. I want to be happy. I want my son to notice that. You know, later, he's too young now for me to explain that to him, but I know that eventually, you know, me and his mother, hopefully we can do this together. Go see him at when they sing, a talent show, the field day. You know, I want to do that, and I would hope that she would invite me and not just do it on my own, or that she would do it on her own, like we're still parents. And then this importance of the role of the father, which I'm sure we can have an extensive discussion about after this part of the talk. So really the kids need us, you know what I'm saying? They always got a mother. A mother can conceive and carry and nurture everything. A father's like a king to his pride. He got to stand there and protect and show them different. Show them better ways, you know? Show them how you can control being there as a father, standing there as a man, not walk away. My father wasn't around. My mom could show me tough love, but she can't be that father. You need a daddy in your life. You need that father in your life. The man should be right there to tell you right and wrong, how you got to stand as a man with a female. So the program taught you how to have a backbone, how to be a real father to your kid. If you were being a bad mouth and a spineless coward, that class told you what you were missing. So I think we'll come back to this when we're talking more broadly, but you can see there's some interesting things here, right? Feeling very proud of the importance of the relationship and of the role modeling that he can provide for his son, but I think somewhat problematically using a lot of assumptions and stereotypes about what being a real man is that really are, you know, as Connell describes, like hegemonic, right, about what masculinity is. And then there's this recognition of the role, of the work of motherhood. Fatherhood, I enjoy it. I'm raising my 2 kids by myself. It's not easy all the time, but you got to show the kids that you're their father and that any given time, that if they have questions, they have needs, you try your very best to fulfill it. And that way, you cannot go wrong. I'm not saying it's easy. That's why I would say I give my hat off to any woman that raises kids, because that's a job that 10 men could not accomplish. It's not easy. My sources of support right now are single mothers. They give me an inspiration. They're the ones who give me good words, good advice, just telling me certain stuff about my daughters, how you should carry yourself, how you should carry your daughter and act with her. I really give a shout out to my mother and the single mothers out there doing it. That's my inspiration. So it's kind of interesting, right, if you read this and then compare it to the quote before, right? This idea that single mothers are doing all of this work and that Isaiah himself feels that he got a lot from his mother, right, and from the women in his life. But then there's this idea that maybe there's something missing if a man is not in a child's life. So there's several things we can talk about, so I'm excited to open it for discussion. But they do, you know, the dads talked about how changing the relationship with the mother was a really important aspect of being a father. They talked about retooling and using techniques of de-escalation and perspective taking. So we see that kind of coming through from the curriculum to then into the actual lived experience. But norms of masculinity kind of permeate these narratives about how they understand themselves as fathers. Strength is one, being in control is another, having a backbone, right? All these kind of norms that we associate generally with masculinity, showing right from wrong. So I think, you know, the big question in all of this is how do we engage fathers without falling into a trap of reinforcing hegemonic masculinity? Because in in Connell's original conception of hegemonic masculinity, it was really about always the relationship of masculinity to femininity, that you don't have hegemonic masculinity without the dominance of women and other men, right? And so this, especially as fatherhood is a relational concept, right? A relational to the women, but also relational to the children. I think it really problematizes like where exactly are these fatherhood programs located in our society, and are they, what is the cost benefit, let's say, right? Implications, as a qualitative researcher, I like to say this, qualitative inquiry helps us uncover domains of action and change that are happening, but are really hard to measure on a scale. So Dr. Hayward talked about, so there's, in all the fatherhood programs that are funded federally, have a set of criteria that they have to, like aspects that they have to measure on scales about how the fathers are doing, right? It doesn't get at a lot of this really interesting stuff. And it's important, obviously, because you have, with quantitative research, you get to make kind of estimations about what's happening with the whole group. But I think it's really interesting to kind of look more qualitatively at some of these dynamics. Fatherhood programs can be important allies in the movement to end IPV. Now, obviously, this is talking about like intimate partner violence and maltreatment kind of way on the front end, right, the prevention level, but I think it's important. They may benefit from future modification to interrogate and critique gender hierarchy as a means to ending gender-based violence. We would like to thank you for your attention, and especially thank Jack for all of the work that he's done on this. And the three of us are here to engage in a discussion with all of you. So thank you.
So I'm opening the floor. Questions, maybe we take two at a time. Sophia?
Yeah, I'll start with one. I'm wondering and thinking in terms of fatherhood and masculinity being relational, how that sort of squares with this recognition of motherhood as strength and work, which are normally the like masculine domains. Mm-hmm. So is there like a retooling of fatherhood or a notion of being a man in relation to that to maintain some distinction?
Can I piggyback on that?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, because I understood it the exact opposite, and I wanted to ask, really, what is I'm being provocative, what is the program doing for perceptions of masculinity? Because this was a self-attribution of the man who said, I need to be here because I need to be strong, I need to be in control, I have to have backbone and showing right from wrong. And I had two thoughts. One, this is a reproduction of certain ideas, and the second is, of course, all of these criteria fit for single mothers, meaning they are strong, they are in control, they have backbone, they show right from wrong. So this is the kind of, it makes it even worse. What?
That's even if a couple is still together. I mean, you're both responsible for modeling for your child all of those qualities.
Right, but so, the question is, there seems to be like, who can claim that legitimately? I'm not talking about what's, of course, following up on that question. I find that also interesting. So I'm to provoke the discussion. Is it possible that these programs? And I don't think it is, but I'm throwing it out.
No, I mean, I think there's been a big critique of fatherhood programs so there's been, I think, kind of the concept of hegemonic masculinity was developed kind of in the late 80s and 90s, and then there's this, really importantly to Connell's conception of hegemonic masculinity is that it is historical, right? So it's associated with Gramsci and that's how change happens, right? So he never said hegemonic masculinity is this way. What he said is hegemonic masculinity occurs in relationship to women, and in relationships sort of in order to subordinate women, but also to subordinate other men, right, who don't achieve these kind of qualities, but that it's possible for that hegemony to change over time. And so I think what we're seeing is, right, we're seeing changes in what maybe is hegemonic about masculinity. But I don't think the central thing, which is that it subordinates women and other men, has changed. And I think that's what, I think that's kind of what you see in some of this, right? That yes, women are working hard and that and they can do it all. They're doing it all, but somehow it's not enough because there isn't this man who's providing the role modeling. And I think about this a lot in terms of engaging men who exist in a very specific context historically and socially. It's going to be very hard to engage men if you're not talking about being strong, if you're not using language that means something to them, and obviously those things are all internalized, right? That it's all. So I think there's a reason why the fatherhood programs use the language that they do and try to engage the men in the way that they do.
And the program also engages men by focusing on the economic stability pieces.
Right.
We don't let the men have to go through the parenting, the fatherhood, the relational before they can receive the concrete and the economic services, and that's really the draw that we're pulling them into the program with.
Which again, reinforces this idea that they are supposed to be providers, even though, as has been critiqued with these fatherhood programs in general, it still reinforces, it still keeps certain men who are low income, who are never going to be earning as much as they can to provide solely for a family. It reinforces the whole system, right? But does that mean they're a bad idea? I find the whole thing very difficult. What do you think?
I personally am convinced and swayed by your presentation about the benefits of it. I'm raising broader questions.
Yeah.
It's a little bit, you can do what you can do, but the symptoms themselves are, as you say, cultural change. So I would think, for instance, the emergence of single parent households, which is mostly women, there are exceptions, but mostly women, is going to become such a normal feature of society, hopefully supported by the state, that, for instance, the role of the nuclear family and this presupposition that the father plays a role model might change. I'm not saying we're obviously not there. So there's real cultural change that is on the way or not. I don't know. You can, for instance, if you were to compare this with, let's say, Scandinavia, where single parent family households are more accepted, are supported by the state, and blah, blah, blah. What's going on there? I'm not trying to say do it comparatively, but so there's also the culture of a particular place and so on and so forth that plays a big role. I don't think any of this is any reason not to do it as you do it as you can do it, because you're right. What's the point of talking to people if it doesn't resonate with them?
One of the critiques that I find really interesting about fatherhood programs is that they are taking needed money away from those single mothers, right? So there's this whole federal program dumping money here. As to your point, if we were to spend that money on single moms, would that actually provide a better benefit? And I think that's an interesting critique, but it's a much more.
I don't think it's relevant critique because the amount of money that you throw on this program
is low
versus the amount of money that you would have to systemically invest in all kinds of legal rights for women. I think it can be easily dismissed as peanuts compared to what would be needed to do the right way, to do right by single parents.
So I'm just curious, it's a very interesting talk, just curious if you work at all with the mothers in these programs, that is, they grew up in the same society and the same expectations for men, namely that he should bring some money to the table, and if he suddenly arrives and says, well, money's not the only thing, and I don't have any money so I can teach the kid to ride a bike, and that's just as good, I'm now a good dad, how's the mom responding to this new view of fatherhood?
So the program does focus primarily on fathers, but in the relationship group, there is a group that they can bring their significant other. That's not necessarily the mother of their child. It could be the person they're currently in a relationship with, and they could be a father figure or a stepfather to a whole new set of children in that household. But I think it's a really good point, and I think that's where it's emphasized even in the fatherhood curriculum, that communication with the mother, so that maybe it's them that's making that progress and showing the mother what they can provide. Because we do have fathers who say, I can't see my child because I'm not paying child support, or she said, come back when you've got something to give, I mean, we do see that. So while the program focuses on the father, it does also emphasize the communication piece with the mother.
I mean, I'm just wondering if the mother says to the father, you haven't changed at all. Does she mean you're not providing?
Right.
And then he shuts down completely and doesn't tell her anything about what he's, it becomes a brick wall. I just don't see this as going
Well,
too well. So it seems like you would need to almost involve the mothers of the children to, that we're setting up a whole new system here of what's a good parenting relationship involving two parents, that our standards are changing
Right.
for good parenting.
And the mothers that do come into the program with the dads, they already have some type of good relationship, and
Right.
because they're agreeing to come to the program. So the ones with the most adversarial relationships, we don't see those mothers. Do you have a question?
I may have missed it, but are these only fathers that have a mother also active in the life of the child, or were they possibly like lone fathers who didn't have a mother involved?
Some are single fathers, yes.
Because I asked that because I was kind of saddened by the quote that 10 men couldn't do what one mother can.
And that was a single dad saying that, right?
might have been, yeah.
Because I mean, the fact that the father can not only provide and can care and be emotionally caring, like, I don't see, like, that, it truly made me sad, because do you also have that message in there that the man can do all parts on his own as well? Like, was that a common theme that, like, I can't do as, like, I certainly want them to respect the mother if she's involved, but.
I think for most of them, it's the opposite problem in that they're not seeing their children very often or regularly. Would you say that's true?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the emphasis of the program is on that kind of relationship. But definitely, I mean, I think there is, I mean, the other thing that's been critiqued in general about fatherhood in general, right, is this idea, this notion that, and it is repeated in some of the fatherhood curricula, is that men are helping the wives when they, let me help, make sure you help with the dishes, make sure you help babysit.
Babysit.
Right?
Babysit,
So-
horrible phrase, your own children.
So in that respect, yeah, that would be problematic, right? Because if you're a single dad, then you're not helping, you're doing, as they all should be feeling that they do, right? I think it's a good question and critique. I mean, what's interesting to me, this is somewhat tangential to what you said, but I've been wanting to just mention it because it's not in the slides, is there runs through many of the narratives a sense of essentialism, and especially biological essentialism, about men and women, but also about fatherhood. So we really noticed recently, when Jack and I were looking at it, that there's a different way they talk about their response. They feel responsible for all the children they have and maybe stepchildren they might have, but but the men talked about, if it's not my biological child, I don't want to step on the other father's toes, and that father has more rights to that child than I do. And when I say rights, I don't mean like legal rights. I mean they should have primary emotional rights to that child. So that's different from what you're talking about, but I think the biological essentialism stuff is interesting too. And I think it goes with whether like mothers are naturally nurturing and fathers naturally are not, right? That's how I was connecting it in my mind. I don't know what you
That plays into the idea of hybrid masculinity that we talked about in the beginning of this presentation, bringing up the domain of financial provision, but also bringing up the domain of nurturing. Well, when we meet a lot of fathers that are kind of gate-kept through child support, their focus is on that financial provision, which plays back into the hegemonic masculinity, and therefore the focus kind of goes off of being a nurturing father, unfortunately. That's kind of part of what we're talking about today.
Is there also, please go ahead.
Have you conducted any follow-up to anyone that's passed through the program, and if yes, like what successes have they achieved related to what they learned?
Well, so we do, for our quantitative study, we we talked to the guys in intake before they receive services at 6 weeks and 12 weeks. And already by 12 weeks, we're at like 40, we've lost 60%. So there hasn't been any long-term follow-up because we even struggle to keep people in our evaluation protocol at 6 weeks. We're at like 80% now at 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And about 40 still at 12 weeks. So by 3 months, we've lost more than half of them.
There's a lot of disruptions when it comes to transportation or the problems in their life coming back when it comes to substance use or homelessness, and therefore it can be really difficult to achieve that long-term follow-up. That being said, that subsample of 40 fathers that we did the qualitative study with, we typically find that interview happens around the 12-week mark or maybe a little bit later. So those are fathers that are highly engaged in the program, are not being lost to follow-up.
And some of the fathers do stay in touch with the program year after year.
Yeah.
And come back as peer mentors or check in from time to time, but those are, it's a very self-selecting sample of dads.
I was wondering if there's any interaction with the child welfare system, or if that was an exclusion criteria, or, you know, and if there was, or if there were any,
We have.
what you saw with that, if it had any impact.
Oh, yeah. So we do have an exclusion criteria in that we don't take fathers who have an active, and this is by self-report, an active child abuse or domestic violence case. Because it's a domestic violence agency, we can't have that conflict and the child, and we're thinking of it as a prevention program. So there's curriculum on domestic violence prevention, there's curriculum on child maltreatment prevention, but we don't take the fathers that are kind of actively involved in those systems. And we haven't looked at child maltreatment or family violence prevention as like an outcome. It would be interesting to look.
That being said, they talk about,
Well, that's what I was wondering.
in the interviews, they will talk about previous involvement or just involvement with systems in general. Because a lot of them feel, would you say this is true? I mean, a lot of them feel that they have had a lot of involvement with a lot of systems. So child welfare, jail, yeah.
We provide that education as well. When pre and post education class, we ask them about their perceptions toward child support. And I'm not sure if we've done, all the analysis, but I think that there is some kind of miseducation prior to going into the program about what their expectations are if they're involved or have been in the past with child support agreements.
Yeah.
I had a question. Does the amount of children like the father has have any impact on like relationship with the mother? So like would like fathers with less children be able to have like better relationship with the mother?
I think that's, I can't see you, but I think that's a really good question, and it's really hard for us to answer from our quantitative data because they might have many children with different partners, and so which relationship are you talking about? The relationship they're in currently, or maybe their relationship with the child's mother? Because they tend to have the kind of best relationship with whatever women they're with at the moment. Right, so they might have, and so we ask them if they're in a relationship, we ask them a lot of questions about how they feel about relationships and their relationship satisfaction, but we don't yet know, at least quantitatively, how that current partner is tied to their children that they're talking about.
There was a move afoot with another researcher, so it's looking at how people
Did ask those questions.
like work across multiple relationships, parents across multiple relationships. We haven't looked at that specifically in the qualitative data, but I think it's really interesting. And also like monogamy and non-monogamy is a huge interesting topic as well that we touched on a little bit in the interviews. Yeah.
We see in the qualitative data one of a father's motivations toward, if their goal is to increase their relationship, better their relationship with their child, and one of the ways that they go about that is through increasing and better establishing the relationship with the mother of that child, and so that becomes a motivation for them. And so.
But it's difficult if they're in another relationship with another child, and that is that's where, when I was talking about that biological part, about whether they're actually the father of that child, like if they're partnered with another person who has another child. It can be there's a lot of different permutations, so I think it's hard to fully answer that question. Yeah.
How do you find trying to help these fathers develop interpersonal relationships with themselves and fatherhood and with their children, and even with the mothers of their children when there's such forcible pullback from the mother? I mean, it was like a hard question for me to form, but I thought about my mother, and you couldn't say the word dad around her, wouldn't let us see him, wouldn't answer calls from him, wouldn't talk to him on the phone to plan like a get-together when you rely on like your infant children to plan like time with their father. How can you build them up into trying to even just be amicable when it's like I can't even get on the phone with the woman of my child, the mother of my child? So it's just interesting. I'm just trying to think like how can you help these fathers but be fathers when there's no even like a flimsy bridge to get there. So I was just curious how that goes.
I think like Jack, you jump in. I think the peer support is really helpful with those particular issues, because there's a lot of dads who've been through the program who may have like been, and we see that in the qualitative. They say, I talked to this other dad and he had been through what I went through, and then they're able to see that there is like potential for some type of change in that relationship.
We also saw, and this is kind of a separate thing, but we looked at use of cell phones with this population, and we saw that as a child gets older into adolescence, the father may use the cell phone as a way of bridging that relationship with their child despite that gatekeeping from the mother if they have a really poor relationship. And so they can kind of re-engage that way, especially since Suffolk County has a big transportation problem, so they can't always be physically present.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point and kind of speaks to the strength of having dads at different times of their life, kind of. There were some dads in this sample that have grown-up children and some dads that have younger children, and so you really do see some of that, even though they could retrospectively say this is how the relationship changed, and then they feel like they have a real relationship now, even though they didn't for a long time. I will also say though, in the qualitative data, there's a lot of sadness around issues like that, and a lot of feeling like what you're talking about, like feeling sad that they're trying to do a bunch of stuff, but there's not that much they feel they can do. I think that's really hard.
Through this program, did you see relationships with the mothers improve over time, or like even in like when they aren't in your kind of situation, like they were starting off pretty bad but not too bad, but they slowly got better?
So we've looked at that two ways. We've looked at it in the quantitative study, and we don't see a ton of like movement when we're talking about relationships or conflicts. And so that's one of the reasons that we did this qualitative study, so that we could really capture the stories. The issue is, in this sample of 40, as Jack pointed out, these are the dads that were most engaged in the program. They were willing to come and sit and talk for an hour, and they were really able to open up and share. So we only have those stories, but I think in their stories we do see some, even from the quotes, changes in how they're responding to the mothers. And potentially, but that's also more like another question, like a long-term follow-up, to see if they're, what it's like a year later, are there still those effects, and we just don't have that information.
And in that separate program that you had with the partners of the fathers, did you see any kind of improvement in their relationships in that way?
Well, again, they tend to be the couples that have better relationships to begin with, so we don't see a lot of huge change. If we could get the guys and their partners who are like not speaking to each other, but those aren't the ones that are going to come in, because that's not a required component. So I should have said that before, like the fatherhood, the parent skills is a required component. They have to do that before they can get anything else. The relationship group is voluntary, and it's much smaller numbers. What % would you say do the relationship group? I mean, less than half.
Yeah, that's close to half, and it depends on.
I mean, but it speaks to the larger, the question earlier of, you know, this, I think this is a limitation
Can we do this without
of fatherhood programs, that we're doing it without the mothers, right? And it kind of goes to your point too.
I mean, really, you would like parenthood programs.
Yeah,
Right?
right.
And there do tend to be a lot of parenting programs for mothers.
But that's, and this is why
Child
these
welfare,
yeah.
were started. It's very, you know, it's so interesting. It's
still
so
fragmented.
bifurcated, yeah. Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the distinctions between de-escalating conflict and controlling emotions. And when, I mean, I think I saw some in the qualitative, like, you know, controlling emotions as the skill. I saw some in the qualitative, like, it's okay to have feelings, but I don't have to blow up. But then, you know, where you think, and I think you've nodded on this, like, that could also be the bottle up, like, you know, sort of don't have feelings except for anger kind of, like, masculine trope, you're not allowed to feel. So how did those, in terms of the coding, how did you separate those? And then what were the kind of nuances that came out of those from the men who are using these tactics?
Do you want to answer that?
I can probably answer that in part. I think
Yeah.
that some of what we saw in thematic mapping was that when we ask these two questions, we see that fathers that are utilizing some certain skills that they learned in the program are thinking about and having attitudes toward that relationship in one way. So for example, a father that is focusing more in this conversation, this qualitative conversation, on controlling their emotions, they might be the father that is telling us that they're trying to de-escalate through a kind of stoicism or being a brick wall. Whereas the father that is using skills of speaker-listener, active listening, patience, they might be the father that is more likely to have some engaged perspective taking going on.
I think it's a really interesting question though, and I think maybe it's something that we need to think about a little bit more in terms of, the way we didn't kind of put this up there, but the way we've been thinking about drawing it as it's like a model is that these things are coming together in the communication, so that there's the de-escalation as an approach, like theoretically maybe that they've learned, but that the skill is more the actual controlling of the emotion. I mean,
Okay, right, so one is a process and one is a tool kind of thing.
Exactly, like we have skills and I can't remember exactly what yeah, that's what the thing looks like, the conceptual map. But I think it is complicated, is I guess what I would say, because I think there are men who would talk specifically about controlling their emotions in an effort to be like, I decide that I'm not gonna talk and I'm gonna wait for them to talk, which is like really hard. Right, and so that actually allows for perspective taking in some cases too.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's a good question that I don't know that we have fully ferreted out. So, yeah.
Your next paper.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry. Do you have programs for like a father in a situation where like the mother moved states away, or is that?
Yeah, so we, either the dad or the child has to live in Long Island, Suffolk or Nassau County, but sometimes the children are out of state. So we still try, and sometimes the dad moves out of state and we still do follow up with them because they might be parenting the child who's still here.
Clarification question, interpersonal violence, how is that conceptualized? Is that just physical violence?
We had a slide on that.
That we deleted right before.
I thought you were.
The way we're thinking about it is both physical, sexual, emotional, and financial, I think is, yeah. So a much broader conceptualization than just physical violence. Basically what would be measured on some sort of conflict tactic scale or some sort of type of approach, you know, yeah.
Well,
I think I missed this part. I was just wondering how you recruit. How do you?
Oh, that's a great question.
You did miss it, but I also forgot to talk about it, so. It came up later. So fathers are either recruited through other dads who've been in the program, through relationships that the staff at the program have with substance abuse facilities, homeless shelters, housing programs. What else? I'm looking at Jack because he's out there.
There's community programs.
Community-based
I
programs.
mean, Jack, do you want to talk about what you do?
Yeah.
Talk about what you do.
I do the quantitative data collection, and so at baseline, at 6 weeks, and then at 12 weeks for follow-up, I meet with the clients using an iPad to go through 2 surveys that takes about an hour. The first is through the Inform program, and so that is a survey that's created by our granting organization, and then we also have a local evaluation study that Dr. Hayward has come up with that asks some more comprehensive questions about things that we're interested in. And that means that I get to meet these clients at
in the field
during their first class, and then when they finish the class and they get their certificate, and then again for a long-term follow-up individually. And often that is happening in the program that they're in. So for example, some examples of organizations out there that we work with are Phoenix House, which is a well-known substance use program where they're inpatient because they were admitted for using drugs, and they said that they're a father and they're interested in this program because we have a standing relationship with that program. Also, the Salvation Army is a homeless shelter that we go to, and an example of a community organization where they might not be residential there is EOC, or the Economic Opportunity Council of Suffolk and Nassau that we work with. And there is, another big one that we get a lot of clients from is the Suffolk County Jail. So I go to the Yaphank facility as well as the Riverhead facility, and into the Veterans Pod and the pod specific for clients who have received a DWI. So again, we're capturing some substance use there as well.
And then most of the self-referrals or the referrals from other clients, they'll run a group at the HaWWW office of the program.
Yeah.
So the groups are run, I should have said that at the beginning, like in community-based organizations, but also there's a main office, and that tends to be people who are kind of referred by friends or have heard about the program.
So are these men who have been determined to be like at risk of using abuse?
No. They're only considered at risk because they're low income, but then they're screened out if they have current domestic violence or child abuse. But the only criteria, they have to live in Suffolk or Nassau County. We were in Suffolk only until about a year ago. We just expanded into Nassau County. They have to be low income, which is kind of loosely defined as below, I think, 75. We're a little loose with what low income is on Long Island because it's different than a lot of other places, or underemployed or unemployed.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the guys that come in are unemployed, so the income question is not.
And they have to be the primary father figure for a child under the age of
Yes.
24.
Like, how do you measure preventing intimate partner violence?
Well, we're not really.
We're not really.
We're not really.
At this
That-
point.
That's not what the, right.
We look at their anger management and conflict resolution skills. That's kind of our proxy.
Several scales on depression and emotional intelligence, and then the relationship with the mother and child, of course.
Thank you.
Maybe one more?
Thank you all for coming. Thank you for the 3 presenters. So pay attention. I think this was terrific. As a seminar should be, it creates and opens our minds and creates many, many more questions. My question would have been, of course, this is a very class-based analysis. What happens?
Right.
And so on and so forth. So there's lots of things we can have follow-up meetings, I hope. Those of you who have an interest in issues of masculinity and otherwise, check our website, the upcoming events, and stay in touch and look at the results of this.
Does anybody want a pen?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.